Tonight we travel the rain-soaked highways of the Pacific Northwest, where mile markers repeat, radios whisper back, and rest stops never really close. These are true stories from truckers who faced what waits beyond the headlights. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications, so you never miss when the darkness calls again. Now keep your lights low and your CB on. I've been driving freight for 17 years, mostly up and down the West Coast. Long nights, longer highways. You get used to weird things out here. Mirages, lights that don't belong to any car, fog that moves like it's alive. But what happened near Ashland, Oregon still doesn't make sense. Every time I take that route now, my hands lock on the wheel the second I see the number 14. It started on a clear Tuesday night in October. I'd picked up a load of smart TV panels out of Sacramento, bound for Portland. Dispatch was pushing a next-day drop, so I was running heavy and running late. Weather was perfect, crisp air, full moon. Just the hum of the engine and the steady flick of white dashed lines sliding under my headlights. Around 2 a.m., I crossed into Oregon and started climbing through the Siskiyous. The grade was long but easy. My fuel gauge sat right above 3/4. GPS showed exit 14 about 5 minutes ahead. The truck stop I'd hit 100 times before. Coffee there was decent, bathrooms clean, and they didn't mind drivers catching a quick nap. I figured I'd top off the tank, stretch my legs, keep moving. The descent out of the mountains felt too quiet. No other rigs, no headlights behind me. Not even a radio voice cutting through the static. Just the road and that faint country playlist looping on my phone. That's when I noticed the first flicker of wrong. The highway looked normal, but my gut started throwing alarms for no reason. If you've driven long enough, you know that feeling. The air feels heavier, like the road's waiting for something. I brushed it off, checked the dash. 8:47, 293 miles on the odometer, 2:17 a.m. on the clock. Then the mile marker came into view. White post, green numbers, 14. 2 minutes later, I expected the exit sign. Instead, I passed 14 again. Same scratches on the paint, same reflector chip on the corner. I slowed a little, stared at the odometer. Still 8:47, 293. Not 295, not even 294. Exactly the same. I told myself I'd misread it. Maybe I was tired. But 3 minutes later, the song restarted from the same verse. Mama, don't let your babies grow up to be cowboys. And there it was again. Mile marker 14. That's when the fear really settled in. Not the kind that makes you scream. Just a slow, cold pressure that starts at the base of your neck and crawls down. I checked the clock. Still 2:17 a.m. My foot eased off the accelerator. I glanced at the GPS. It was frozen. The little arrow showing my position hadn't moved an inch. Fuel gauge? Unchanged. I tapped the glass. Needle didn't budge. I keyed the CB. Breaker, anybody northbound I-5 near Ashland, copy? Nothing but dead air. Not even static, just emptiness. Like the mic wasn't connected to anything at all. For a long minute I kept rolling, waiting for something, anything, to change. Then the marker appeared again, washed in my headlights. 14th, same spot, same everything. I pulled to the shoulder, hazards on, stepped out into the chill. The world was silent. No wind, no distant hum of tires, not even the soft hiss of power lines. Just the idling engine and my own breathing fogging in front of me. I stared back down the black stretch I'd just driven. The post glowed faintly white like it was painted in moonlight. And somewhere beyond the tree line, I swear I heard it. A single drawn-out note, almost a hum, like a wire singing in the wind. I climbed back in, slammed the door, and tried to laugh it off. But the laugh didn't sound like me. I shifted into gear and pulled forward. In the mirror, the mile marker slid out of view. And 3 minutes later, it was there again, bright as a brand new sign waiting for me at the edge of my headlights. I remember gripping the wheel until my knuckles went white. trying to convince myself it was all a trick of exhaustion. Maybe I'd missed the real marker in the dark. Maybe my eyes were catching the reflection wrong. But deep down, I already knew something was wrong with the road itself. I kept driving. The song still played. Same verse, same guitar twang, same breath between lyrics. I switched stations just to prove I could. The radio clicked once, went silent, then clicked back to the same song like nothing had changed. 3 more minutes. Mile marker 14 again. I checked my odometer. 8:47, 293 miles. Exactly the same. Not a tenth higher. Not a fraction lower. If you've ever driven long haul, you know the odometer's steady tick is a kind of heartbeat. When it stops, it's like your rig's soul just flatlines. I felt panic climbing up my throat. I rubbed my eyes, tapped the dash, even slapped the wheel once, shouting just to break the silence. No echo, no CB chatter, no distant headlights. The night felt sealed off from the rest of the world. My instincts screamed to pull over again. I eased onto the shoulder, but the second I touched the brakes, the steering stiffened, like something was fighting me for control. The wheel wouldn't let me turn fully. Every time I tried to veer left or right, it trembled and locked, forcing me straight ahead. I sat there for a long time, breathing fast, staring at the dashboard clock. Still 2:17 a.m., no movement. It had been 2:17 for who knows how long now. Finally, I killed the engine. Hazard lights flashed against the trees, painting everything in red pulses. I grabbed my flashlight, stepped out, and listened. Silence. Absolute. Even the engine's ticking cooled to nothing. Then something broke that quiet. A faint, rhythmic tapping, like metal under strain. It was coming from somewhere up the road. I couldn't see what it was, but every hair on my arm stood up. That tapping grew slower, heavier, until it faded completely. I climbed back in and restarted the truck. Every gauge flicked to life like normal except the fuel. Still frozen at 3/4, I forced a laugh and muttered, "All right, 14. Let's see how far you go." I floored it. 60, 70, 80 miles an hour. The trailer rocked side to side, tires humming like jet engines. Headlights cut through the darkness, but the world beyond stayed still. No terrain change, no exits, just the same flat stretch rolling forever. Then, out of the black, the marker appeared again. 14, I screamed, slammed my palm against the horn and kept my foot down. The noise didn't echo. It just died in the air like the sound had nowhere to go. When I looked down, the clock still read 2:17. The odometer still showed 8:47, 293. And Waylon Jennings still sang the same damn line. Don't let your babies grow up to be cowboys. I felt something break inside me then. I wasn't angry anymore, just scared. The kind of scared that makes you start talking out loud just to remind yourself you're real. I said my name, my route, the date. Anything to prove time was still moving. And that's when I noticed movement in my mirror. Something tall and thin flickered just at the edge of my taillights. I thought it was a reflection until it shifted, crossing the road in 2 impossible strides. Too quick, too smooth. For half a second it looked human, but stretched like a silhouette stretched across glass. I slammed the brakes. The truck fishtailed hard, trailer swaying like it was about to jackknife. Then it stopped dead in the center of the lane. The engine still idled, but I couldn't move. My chest felt tight, air catching in my throat. I reached for the CB again. Static hissed for the first time in hours. Then through the fuzz I heard what sounded like a whisper. It wasn't words exactly, more like someone breathing through the mic, long and slow. I froze, staring at the radio. The voice came again, low and faint, but this time I could almost make out the sound. "Keep driving." I jerked the power knob off, heart hammering. That's when the headlights blinked, once, twice, then went dark. For a second I sat in complete blackness. Then the lights flicked back on and the road in front of me was empty again. No figure, no shape, no movement, just mile marker 14, standing in my beams like it had never left. I don't remember deciding to move. I just know that suddenly the truck was rolling again, faster than I'd ever driven. I kept my eyes straight ahead, hands locked on the wheel, whispering, 15, 15, 15, like saying it enough times might make it appear. But the road didn't care what I wanted. The next sign I saw was 14 again. And for the first time in my life, I realized what it meant to truly be lost. Not on a map, but inside a moment that refuses to end. I must have passed that same stretch of asphalt 50 times before my brain stopped fighting it. At some point, panic turns into something worse, acceptance. I remember gripping the wheel so tight my fingers went numb, staring at those white dashed lines flicking by like clock hands that no longer kept time. The air in the cab felt heavy, too still, like the oxygen was running out. The dash lights glowed pale orange across my hands. The gauges didn't move. Neither did the clock. Still 2:17 a.m. When I finally spoke, my voice cracked like I hadn't used it in years. "All right," I said out loud, "what do you want?" The words sounded stupid the second they left my mouth, but part of me was sure something could hear me. For a few seconds, there was nothing. Then the CB crackled softly. Not the usual hiss of static, but faint voices overlapping, out of sync. They weren't speaking English. They weren't speaking anything at all. It was like the sound of distant conversation underwater, muffled syllables that my brain wanted to translate but couldn't. "Breaker 19, I tried again, voice shaking. "If anyone's out there, I'm stuck on I-5 northbound near Ashland. Something's wrong with the road." The response came instantly, a short burst of static, then a single word. "Drive." That's it, just that one word, stretched and warped until it didn't even sound human. I shut the radio off so hard the knob snapped in half. The headlights flickered once, then twice. Then everything went dark again. I couldn't see a thing, not even the dash lights. The only sound left was my own heartbeat slamming in my ears. I told myself to breathe, to count, to do anything that felt real. When the lights came back on, I almost screamed, because I wasn't alone anymore. There was a shape in the lane about 30 feet ahead. It looked like a person, standing perfectly still but wrong. Too thin, too tall, shoulders tapering into a narrow head that seemed to tilt at an impossible angle. No eyes, no face, just a black outline flickering like bad film. I blinked. It was gone. I didn't think, didn't reason, didn't even check my mirrors. I slammed my foot down and drove. The truck roared forward, trailer shaking, tires humming like aircraft. I focused on the center line, whispering mile numbers under my breath. 15, 15, 15. And then, like someone flipped a switch, there it was. Mile marker 15. I almost didn't believe it. For a second, I thought it was another trick, another repetition. But when I passed it, the air felt different, lighter, real. The odometer jumped. 847, 294. 47,295. The numbers ticking again like a heart restarting after flatline. The clock blinked once, then jumped to 10:43 a.m. 9 hours gone. The radio changed on its own, cutting from Waylon Jennings to an ad jingle. Bright and normal and completely wrong for the night I'd just survived. My hands started shaking so bad I had to pull off at the first truck stop. When I parked, I just sat there for maybe 20 minutes, staring at the steering wheel, trying to breathe. The fuel gauge, still 3/4. Exactly where it had been when the loop started. I told dispatch I'd had mechanical trouble. They were pissed about the missed delivery, but I didn't care. I wasn't about to explain that time itself had glitched out on me somewhere south of Medford. After a few hours and 3 cups of burnt coffee, I finally checked the dash cam footage. 8 hours and 47 minutes of video, all of it black highway. And every few minutes that same green post flashing in the corner of the frame. Mile marker 14. No sound. No skips, just endless motion and the same stretch of road. I pulled the SD card out and snapped it in half right there. Didn't want it in my truck. Didn't want it near me. When I finally made it to Portland the next night, another driver at the dock noticed I looked rough. He asked if I'd been through Ashland lately. I hesitated, then nodded. He got real quiet, then said, "Mile 14? I didn't answer, but he didn't need me to. Turns out I wasn't the first. Or the second. 3 other drivers had stories about that stretch. Fuel gauges freezing, time gaps, GPS failures, even voices on the CB repeating back what they'd just said. None of them could explain it. But every single one refused to drive that section at night again. I don't either. If I have to run northbound, I take exit 11 and go through town. Adds 45 minutes, but I sleep easier. Every time I pass that marker in daylight, it looks normal. White post, green numbers, sunlight bouncing off the reflector. But the second my headlights hit it after dark, it feels alive again, like it's waiting. People think the road's solid. That time always moves forward. But out there, on those long stretches where no one lives and nothing grows, the rules bend. Sometimes the road folds over itself, and if you're unlucky, you fall inside the crease. If you ever find yourself on I-5 near Ashland around 2 a.m., watch your odometer. Watch your clock. And if you see mile marker 14 twice, don't stop. Don't turn around. Just drive until the numbers start to mean something again. Because once that loop grabs you, you don't escape it. You just hope it lets you out. I've hauled freight through almost every back road on the West Coast. But Highway 101 along the Washington coast has always had a mood of its own. Fog sits on that stretch like it's nailed there. The pines lean over the asphalt, and the ocean wind hits the cliffs hard enough to shake your mirrors. You can drive 100 miles and never see another set of headlights. That night, the rain started south of Port Angeles and never let up. I was running high-value electronics from Seattle to Aberdeen. 5 pallets of imported monitors worth nearly $2 million. The company trusted me because I'd never lost a load, never missed a window. But construction near Olympia had pushed me 3 hours behind schedule, and dispatch wanted me to make up the time. So I was still rolling close to midnight when I saw the van. It was pulled onto the shoulder, hazards flashing, rain bouncing off the roof like gunfire. Nothing unusual about that. Breakdowns happen out here all the time. Overheated transmissions, dead alternators, bad tires. Still, the guy standing next to it caught my eye. He was waving both arms, jumping like he was about to run into traffic. I almost kept going. I really did. But I've got a daughter who drives these highways alone sometimes, and I'd want someone to stop for her. So I eased off the throttle, threw my hazards on, and pulled 50 feet ahead of him. The wiper slapped across the windshield as I grabbed my flashlight and stepped into the rain. He ran toward me before I'd even closed the cab door. That should have been the first red flag. People who are really stranded usually stay with their vehicles. They don't sprint at an 80,000-pound rig in the middle of a storm. He looked mid-40s, lean, rain jacket zipped up to his chin. "Thank God someone stopped," he said, breath fogging in the cold. "Alternator's dead. Phone's dead. Been out here an hour." His story sounded normal enough, but the way he said phone's dead stuck in my head. There's almost no cell service on this stretch anyway. And he said it like he already knew I'd check. Lightning flashed somewhere behind the cliffs, lighting his face for half a second. That's when the second red flag hit me. He wasn't wet enough. His jacket looked damp, sure, but not soaked like mine, and it had been pouring solid for hours. "Need a ride to the next town?" I asked. He shook his head. "Nah, just need a jump. But..." Then he paused, looked over my shoulder at my trailer, and smiled. "You're hauling electronics, right? Seattle shipment?" The hair on my arm stood straight up. My trailer was unmarked. No logo, no ID numbers that said what I carried. "How do you know that?" I said. He didn't blink. The fake panic drained from his face like he'd turned off a switch. "Because we've been tracking your load since Tacoma." His voice dropped half an octave. "You're 3 hours late. Should have been through here at 9, not midnight." I backed up fast, hand slipping on the wet door handle. Before I could climb in, he raised one hand and whistled. 2 more men stepped out of the dark from behind my trailer, both wearing black rain gear, both moving too calmly for a random robbery. One had a radio pressed to his mouth, speaking in short CB codes I recognized. 10-4, 10-20 Smoky Report, he said. Perfect trucker lingo. That's when I realized what this really was. They weren't random thieves. They were truckers once. Guys who knew the routes, the timings, the habits. They knew where the cell coverage died, where the turnouts were blind, where a rig could disappear for an hour and no one would notice. "Keys," the first man said, holding out his hand. Rain dripped off his fingers. I shook my head. "You're out of your mind," he smiled. "You don't hand them over, we take them. You walk home either way." My pulse hammered. I glanced at the cab 30 feet away up a slick grade. Behind me, the other two were spreading out, one moving toward the driver's side, the other angling behind the trailer tires. The van's engine roared to life. They'd never broken down at all. That's when I ran. Not away, toward the truck. 40 extra pounds and 56 years old don't make for speed. But adrenaline doesn't care about birthdays. Boots splashed through puddles. I hit the steps hard, grabbed the door, and hauled myself inside. One of them lunged for the handle just as I slammed it shut. Fist hit the glass with a dull thud. I fired the ignition. The diesel coughed once, then roared awake. Through the rain-streaked windshield, I saw the first man backing toward the van, shouting orders I couldn't hear. Headlights flared behind me as they jumped in. By the time I hit third gear, they were on my bumper. I pushed the rig to 60 in less than 20 seconds, engine screaming, trailer swaying. The road was slick and narrow, lined with guardrails that dropped into black forest. In my mirror, the van's lights grew brighter. They weren't letting me go. I grabbed the CB mic. "Emergency Channel 9, any law enforcement on 101 south of Forks, I need help now." Static. Then nothing. I tried again. Nothing but that hollow, jammed silence that makes your stomach drop. That's when I understood they were blocking the signal. And I was completely alone. The wipers couldn't keep up. Rain blurred the world into silver streaks, and the van's headlights behind me burned through it like twin ghosts. Every instinct screamed to floor it, but 80,000 pounds of steel doesn't corner like a car. One wrong move on this road and I'd roll the entire rig down into the forest. The CB was useless. Dead channel, no feedback, no carrier light. Whoever they were, they'd killed my only lifeline. I took the next curve wide, trailer tires clipping the shoulder. The van matched every move, closing fast. Its engine didn't sound stock. It whined higher, turbo screaming. They'd tuned it to hunt. Up ahead, a flash of light, another vehicle coming from the opposite lane. At first, I thought it was some miracle, another driver. Maybe help. Then my stomach dropped. It wasn't passing traffic. It was a second truck, a big one, easing into my lane, blocking me head on. They'd boxed me in. I slammed the air horn and high-beamed them, but the truck ahead didn't flinch. Its hazards blinked red through the rain, crawling forward, daring me to brake. The van behind me closed until I could see water spraying off its grill. 10 feet 5. A voice hissed through the CB, low and calm. "You're making this harder than it needs to be, driver. Pull over and we let you walk away." That tone, professional, steady, hit harder than any threat. They'd done this before. I pressed the mic anyway. "Not a chance." Static swallowed the reply. I needed space, any space. I scanned the GPS. No exits for miles, no rest area, just a thin gray line cutting through the Olympic forest. Then I remembered something. An old logging road about 2 miles ahead. Single-lane dirt spur that branched off right before a creek bridge. I'd seen it a dozen times but never taken it. If I could make that turn, I could lose them long enough to call for help. The distance on the GPS ticked down, 1.8 miles. Behind me, the van bumped my trailer. Not hard, just a nudge. The impact rattled the mirrors. They were trying to herd me. I downshifted and let the engine brake growl through the storm. The rig shuddered but held straight. Up ahead, the lead truck slowed, blocking both lanes completely now. Its taillights pulsed like eyes. I was running out of seconds. Half a mile. Quarter. When the dirt road finally appeared, a dark slit in the trees, I yanked the wheel hard right. 80,000 pounds of freight doesn't like sudden choices. The trailer swung wide, tires shrieking. The whole rig tilted just enough to make me think it was going over. Then the weight caught, slammed back down, and we were on the logging road, branches clawing both mirrors. Behind me, The van overshot the turn. I saw its brake lights flare, red smears vanishing into the rain. The truck that had blocked me kept going straight, maybe trying to radio them. For the first time in 10 minutes, I had open road, if you could call that mud-choked path a road. I pushed the rig deeper into the forest. No guardrails here, just black trees pressing close. The headlights bounced over potholes big enough to swallow a wheel. Each hit sent a shock through my arms. In the mirror, a glow appeared again. The van. They'd found the turn and were following, slower but determined. "Come on, old girl," I muttered to the truck. "Just a little farther." The GPS flickered, lost signal completely. Outside, the storm muted into thick mist. The trees leaned closer until branches scraped the trailer sides like fingernails on metal. Then I saw the bridge, wooden, single lane, spanning a creek swollen with rainwater. It looked older than the highway itself, timbers black with rot, rails half missing. But it was narrow enough to serve one purpose. I floored it across the bridge, water spraying up through the planks. Mid-span, I slammed both feet on the brakes. The rig skidded, tires screaming. I felt the trailer fishtail, then lock. When we stopped, the cab sat halfway across, the trailer blocking the entire bridge behind me. The engine hissed. Steam rose off the hood. I killed the lights. Seconds later, the van burst from the trees. Its beams hit the trailer broadside, stopping short 20 yards back. I could see silhouettes inside, 3, maybe 4. They revved, shouted something I couldn't hear. Then a new sound cut through the rain, the sharp crack of wood under strain. The bridge groaned, deep and angry. I jumped out of the cab, boots landing in ankle-deep mud, and ran for the trees. Behind me, I heard one of them yell, "Don't move that truck." The bridge, then came the snap. A deep wet pop like ribs breaking. I dove behind a fallen log as the roar of collapsing timber ripped through the forest. A flash of light, headlights tipping skyward, then the grinding crash of metal into water. Silence followed, heavy and absolute, broken only by the rain hammering leaves. I stayed there, soaked and shaking until my breath stopped fogging. When I finally looked back, the far half of the bridge was gone. My truck sat tilted but intact, nose just over the remaining edge. The van's lights had vanished. For the first time all night, the forest felt still, like the whole place was holding its breath. I stayed crouched behind that fallen log for what felt like an hour, though it was probably closer to 10 minutes. The rain eased to a steady drizzle, and steam rose from the wreckage where the bridge had given out. Somewhere below, I heard water rushing fast and angry, carrying pieces of timber and maybe more. My truck was half across the bridge, trailer tilted but holding steady. If the whole structure had gone, I'd have been swimming in the dark with 80,000 pounds of freight on top of me. Luck or something else had spared me that. I made my way back up the embankment, mud sucking at my boots. The headlights from my rig were still on, reflecting off broken planks and a spray of rain. No sign of the van. No shouting now. No movement. Just the sound of the creek below and the steady hiss of the engine cooling. I climbed back into the cab, slammed the door, and locked it. Hands shaking so hard I could barely hold the key, I tried the CB again. Nothing but static. Then faintly I heard a voice, clear this time, steady. "Westbound 101, this is State Dispatch. You're breaking up, driver, identify." I almost cried. "Dispatch, this is Unit 74, I've been attacked. Coordinates unknown, logging road off mile 142, bridge collapse." The signal crackled, cut, then came back. "Copy, Unit 74, hold position. County deputies en route." That was the moment it hit me. I'd actually survived whatever that was. The next 45 minutes crawled. I kept the truck idling, headlights on the trees, waiting for something to move. When blue and red lights finally flashed through the rain, I'd never been so glad to see a cruiser in my life. 2 deputies and a rescue truck arrived first, their beams cutting across the wrecked bridge. One of them whistled low. "Holy hell. You're lucky that trailer didn't take you with it." I stepped down, legs rubbery. They came after me. 3 men in a white cargo van, tried to box me in. The deputy looked over the edge where the bridge had collapsed. The water below foamed white in the dark. "No van down there," he said. "Just wreckage." He shined his light on the far bank. Deep tire tracks in the mud leading to where the bridge had been. "Looks like they tried to stop before it gave way. Maybe they backed off. Maybe. But I never saw them again. They took my statement right there in the rain. I told them everything. The fake breakdown, the CB jammer, the blocked lane, the chase. When I mentioned the signal interference, both deputies exchanged a look. "You're not the first, you know," one of them said. "We've had 6 reports this year. Same stretch, same setup. Organized cargo theft. High-end electronics, pharmaceuticals, anything worth reselling overseas." The sheriff's office secured the scene until morning, then called in state troopers and later the feds. By sunrise, the place looked like a crime scene out of a movie. Cones, floodlights, agents in raincoats photographing every tire track. They pulled fragments of a radio antenna out of the mud. Part of a high-range CB repeater. "Military-grade signal scrambler," one of the techs said. 2 weeks later, the FBI contacted my company. They'd made arrests in Tacoma and Portland. 7 suspects, including 2 former truckers. They'd been feeding route info and cargo manifests to the crew for months. The man who'd waved me down had driven for the same carrier years ago before getting fired for theft. I recognized his mugshot instantly. The Bureau recovered part of the jammer from another van, along with blueprints for the section of Highway 101 I'd been on. They knew every blind turn, every dead zone. My load was the jackpot they were waiting for. When the agent handed back my dash cam, he said, "You saved yourself a bullet, driver." Literally. Apparently, they'd found shell casings in one of the suspects' homes. My company towed the rig out with heavy equipment 2 days later. The trailer was intact, not a single crate damaged. They called it a miracle, and even gave me a bonus for protecting the cargo. I didn't feel like I'd earned it. The first night back home, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the bridge, the headlights rising that instant before the crash. I kept hearing the CB hiss, the calm voice saying, "You're making this harder than it needs to be, driver." I still drive Highway 101 sometimes, but never alone. Now I run in convoys, 2 or 3 rigs, nose to tail, radios open, everyone talking. We check in every few miles just to hear another human voice. Sometimes, though usually on rainy nights when fog drifts off the trees, I still catch a whisper through the CB. Short burst of static, then a voice that sounds like his, warped and distant. "You should have stopped." I tell myself it's just interference, maybe a bleed from some distant signal, but the last time I heard it, my GPS froze for half a second, and the time on my dash jumped backward 1 minute. Just enough to make me look twice. Maybe it's nothing. Maybe it's something the highway remembers. Out here you learn that the road isn't just asphalt and paint. It's a living thing, long, patient, and sometimes hungry. And once it's taken something from you, it never really gives it back. If you've ever driven Highway 20 through the North Cascades at night, you know it's not like other highways. It feels alive. The mountains lean in on both sides, the trees form a tunnel, and the air gets so still that even your engine sounds like it's holding its breath. I've run that route dozens of times. Seattle to Omak, usually night hauls because the traffic's lighter and the pay's better. But that Wednesday in late September changed the way I think about silence forever. It started normal. I left Seattle around 8:30 p.m., hauling machine parts for a factory up north. Light drizzle, nothing serious. The forecast called for clear skies once I hit the pass. Everything was running smooth. Phone charged, CB clear, GPS tracking steady. Around midnight, I entered the national park section of the highway. 93 miles of nothing but wilderness between Marble Mount and Omak. It's beautiful in daylight, mountains, rivers, tall pines. At night, it feels like driving across the surface of another planet. The first thing that went wrong was my phone. 1 second, it showed 3 bars of signal. The next, the screen went black. Not no service black, dead black. No light, no reboot, no response. Battery had been at 80%. I tossed it onto the passenger seat and muttered something about cheap chargers. No big deal. I still had the CB GPS and my satellite phone for emergencies. 10 minutes later, the CB gave one short crackle and then died too. No static, no sound, just the green power light glowing like an eye that wasn't seeing anything. I keyed the mic. Breaker 19 eastbound on 20. Anybody copy? Nothing. By the time the GPS froze, I was halfway through the pass. The little arrow on the screen just stopped moving. Even though I could feel the road curving under my tires, the mile counter held steady, stuck on the same number. I tapped it once, twice, nothing. It was like every electronic thing inside my cab had decided to hold its breath. The air changed too. Colder, thinner, like driving into a place where sound didn't work right. No engine echo. No wind noise. Even the wipers moving back and forth started to sound wrong. Too slow. Too loud. I tried the satellite phone next. Dead. Not, no signal. Dead. Screen off. Battery indicator frozen halfway. I started to feel that crawl in my gut that every trucker knows. The warning you can't explain. Something's off. You don't see it yet, but your body knows before your brain does. The dash lights began flickering, gauges bouncing like they couldn't decide what was real. Speedometer dropped to 40, then jumped to 80 without me touching the pedal. Fuel gauge slammed to empty, then full, then halfway. Even the odometer twitched back a mile, like the truck itself was confused about where it had been. I told myself it was an electrical short, moisture from the rain. But deep down I knew that wasn't it. Moisture doesn't kill 4 separate systems at once, and it doesn't make silence feel this heavy. When you drive long enough, you get used to background noise, the hum of the tires, wind cutting past the mirrors, the faint creak of metal under load. When all that disappears, your brain starts filling the void with things that aren't really there. I caught myself humming under my breath just to hear something human. The sound came out thin and shaky. Then I saw movement ahead. A figure standing on the shoulder, thumb out. A hitchhiker. That alone should have been impossible. There's no towns for 50 miles in either direction, no cars, no lights, nothing. He was dressed too clean for a man out walking that far. Dark jacket, slacks, polished shoes that gleamed in my headlights. For a split second I thought about stopping. Then the smarter part of me said no. Not out here. Not now. I kept rolling, watching him from the corner of my eye as I passed. He didn't move. Didn't turn his head. Just stood there, arms still raised, frozen mid-gesture. When I checked my mirror, he was gone. Not walking away. Not fading into the dark. Just gone like he'd been erased from the world. My chest tightened. I grabbed the steering wheel harder and whispered, "You're just tired. You're just tired." But my headlights were picking up something else now, pairs of glowing dots ahead, low to the ground. Deer, maybe. A dozen of them standing dead center in the lane, eyes reflecting red in the beams. I hit the air horn. Not one of them moved. The truck rolled forward another 50 feet and they vanished. Not scattered. Not bolted into the woods. Just gone, same as the hitchhiker. I pulled over right there, shaking so bad I could barely shift gears. I don't know how long I sat staring into the black tree line. All I could think was that silence wasn't supposed to feel like this. Like a living thing pressing its weight down on the world. That's when my radio crackled once. A single burst of static, then nothing, and I realized I was only halfway through those 93 miles. I don't remember deciding to start driving again. 1 second I was parked on the shoulder, staring into darkness, and the next my foot was on the pedal, the truck rolling forward like it had a mind of its own. The world outside the windshield looked the same in every direction. Black trees, black sky, black road. The only color left was the dull orange glow from the dash and the faint red of my hazard switch. Every sense I had was screaming that I shouldn't be here, that I'd crossed into some place where sound and time didn't work the same anymore. About 20 minutes later, at least I think it was 20, my radio flared to life again. Just a quick pop of static followed by a voice so faint I almost missed it. "Me? Anyone?
Copy?
I grabbed the mic fast. Breaker 19, eastbound on 20. Who's calling? No answer. The sound repeated, exactly the same inflection. Same crackle like a recording loop. Then silence. I stared at the CB for a full minute before I realized something. My dash clock hadn't moved since the voice started. It was still stuck on 1:13 a.m. That's when the fear changed. It stopped feeling like panic and started feeling personal. Like whatever was happening knew I was noticing it. The gauges flickered again, speed 55. Then 40, then 70. I wasn't touching the pedal. The engine noise didn't match any of it. Even my headlights began to dim and flare like they were breathing. I killed the radio, shut off the GPS screen, and focused on the one thing that still made sense. The white line on the road's edge. If I could keep that in sight, I could stay grounded. I talked out loud to myself, my name, my truck number, the date, the city I was heading for. It sounds crazy, but when the world goes quiet long enough, your own voice becomes the only proof you're still real. At some point, I started counting the road reflectors just to have rhythm. 1, 2, 3. After maybe 100 of them, something crossed in front of my headlights. Tall. Too tall to be human, too straight to be an animal. It stepped out, paused dead center in the lane, and turned its head toward me. I slammed the brakes. The rig screamed. Trailer sliding sideways, tires skidding on the wet asphalt. Everything slowed down. The reflection of its shape in the rain, the glint of pale skin, arms a little too long for its body. Then it was gone, no impact, no trace. The road ahead was empty. I sat there gasping, gripping the wheel so tight it creaked. The clock still said 1:13. The temperature gauge needle hovered motionless. I told myself it was fatigue, sleep deprivation, isolation hallucinations. I'd read about that happening to pilots and truckers in dead silence. But hallucinations don't make electronics fail one after another. They don't make your watch tick backward. That's what it was doing now, secondhand clicking in reverse, counting back the minutes. I laughed out loud. A sharp broken sound that didn't even feel human anymore. Anything to stop the silence. Then, somewhere behind me, a horn blared. Short stuttering bursts. Another vehicle, finally? I glanced in my mirror. Headlights, faint, distant, creeping up the curve, maybe a quarter-mile back. I hit my own hazards, relief flooding through me. But the lights didn't gain. Didn't dim, didn't angle around corners. They just floated steady, same distance, same glow. And when I finally slowed to let them catch up, they faded completely, like someone had flipped a switch. Gone. The silence came back twice as loud. It had weight now, thick, suffocating, pressing against the cab windows until my ears rang. I tried turning the radio on again just to fill the space. The speakers hissed, then popped, then played something that made my stomach twist, my own voice. Breaker 19, eastbound on 20. Who's calling? The exact words I'd said earlier, repeating through the static. Perfect tone, same pauses, like the road had recorded me and was playing it back. I killed the power and shouted, "Stop it!" The echo bounced off the windshield and died instantly, swallowed whole. When I finally started moving again, I kept one hand clamped on the wheel and the other gripping the door handle. I told myself I'd just keep going until I saw lights, any lights, a rest area, a gas station, a mile marker. Something human, but the mile markers were gone. I should have been seeing them every mile. Instead, there was nothing but the endless dark ribbon stretching ahead. My dash clock flickered, digits smearing like wet ink before blinking out completely. The headlights dimmed to a faint yellow glow, barely touching the road. I pressed the pedal. The truck didn't respond. Speedometer dropped to 0 even though I could feel us moving. That's when I realized I couldn't hear the engine anymore. The truck was still rolling, but there was no sound. Not from the tires, not from the wipers, not even from the rain. Only the faint rasp of my own breathing inside the cab. I reached for the door latch, desperate for air, for anything to break the suffocating quiet. The handle moved but didn't open. It felt welded shut. I stared at the window and saw my reflection staring back, only it wasn't moving quite right. It blinked half a second slower than me, and that's when I knew. Whatever was out there wasn't trying to scare me. It was trying to see what silence could make out of a person. I don't remember how long I sat staring at that reflection. It stared back with my eyes, my face, even the scar on my chin, but it wasn't me. The delay between our movements was wrong, just off enough to make my skin crawl. Then, like someone cut a wire, it vanished. The window was only glass again, and I could see the faint outline of the trees through the fogged windshield. I slammed both palms on the steering wheel. "Enough!" I shouted. The words sounded flat, dull, like it had nowhere to go. No echo, no feedback, just dead air swallowing it whole. That's when the sound started coming back. First, a low hum under my seat, the vibration of tires on pavement. Then, the rattle of rain on the hood. Then finally, the growl of the engine breathing to life again. It was like the world had been holding its breath and suddenly decided to exhale. I didn't question it. I dropped into gear and drove. The headlights brightened, pushing the blackness back inch by inch. The dash flickered on, radio, CB, GPS all rebooting at once. The clock blinked. 3:42 a.m. I'd lost over 2 hours. Or maybe I'd never had them. The GPS instantly recalculated my route. Its digital voice came through the speakers so loud I jumped. Continue for 42 miles to Omak city limits. I'd made it through the entire pass, and I didn't even remember it. Every instinct said pull over, rest, breathe. But the idea of stopping anywhere on that highway made my throat close. I just wanted lights, gas stations, houses, people. Anything that made noise. The first sign I saw nearly broke me. Omak city limit, population 4,605. Streetlights appeared one by one like embers waking in fog. My chest loosened for the first time in hours. I rolled into a truck stop on the edge of town and parked between two refrigerated haulers whose engines hummed like lullabies. When I shut my rig down, I realized I'd been gripping the wheel so hard my fingers had gone numb. I sat there under the buzzing lot lights until sunrise, just listening to sound. The hiss of rain on asphalt, distant highway traffic, my own breathing. I didn't even care that my delivery window was shot. All I could think about was how quiet it had been up there. Quiet enough that the silence had started building its own voice. By the time I checked my equipment, everything looked fine. Battery voltage normal, CB working perfectly. Even my phone powered on like nothing had happened. Still showing 80% charge. Still on the same screen it had frozen at hours before. That's when I opened my ELD log. The electronic logbook that records every minute a rig moves. It showed a 93-mile gap, no data, no speed, no movement recorded between Marble Mount and Omak. Just a blank strip of time. I called my dispatcher and told her I'd had electrical issues in the pass. She didn't ask questions, just told me to get checked in and keep moving. But I couldn't shake it. Later that morning, I talked to another driver fueling beside me. A guy maybe 10 years older, running produce out of Spokane. When I mentioned the silence, he froze mid-swipe on his card. "You were on 20?" he asked. "Yeah, last night." He nodded slowly, eyes on the horizon. "Happens every few years," he said. "My brother-in-law lost all comms there once. Thought it was a solar flare or something. Said the forest swallowed sound for miles." He took a long sip of coffee, then added, "Couple of hikers went missing up that way back in the 90s. Park Service never found them. Not even their radios." I wanted to laugh it off, but when I looked up at the mountains in the distance, my stomach twisted. They were beautiful. Green ridges stretching forever. But they looked different now. Older. Hungrier. Like something up there was still listening. When I got home 2 days later, I tried researching it. Magnetic anomalies in the North Cascades, geomagnetic interference, EM quiet zones. All scientific explanations that sounded neat on paper. But none of them accounted for what I saw or what I didn't see. None explained the hitchhiker who vanished. None explained the clock that froze. and none explained why my own voice played back through the radio hours later. I even checked my dashcam footage, thinking maybe it caught something my eyes missed. The video showed the highway exactly as I remembered it. Black pavement, heavy rain, the faint glow of headlights. Then at 1:13 a.m., the image froze. Just stopped. The timer at the bottom kept running for 2 hours and 27 minutes while the picture stayed still. Then without a cutter glitch, it started moving again at 3:42 a.m. When I paused it at the exact frame where the motion resumed, I saw something reflected in the windshield. Not my face, something standing in the lane ahead. Tall, thin, bent forward like it was leaning to look inside, its outline blurred by rain. Half a second later, it was gone. I deleted the file. Didn't even think. Dragged it to the trash, emptied the folder, then snapped the SD card in half just like I did after Ashland years ago. Now when I run Highway 20, I only do it in daylight. I keep the radio loud and my CB channel open, because I know what happens when the world goes too quiet. Silence isn't empty. It's full of things that wait for you to notice them. And once you do, they notice you back. Most truckers avoid White Pass in the winter. The road's too narrow, the curves too sharp, and the weather changes faster than you can blink. But the pay's double for anyone willing to run it at night, and that kind of money can make a man believe he's invincible. I'd made that run 50 times, Yakima to Chehalis, hauling forestry equipment across the Cascades, knew every curve, every turnout, every place where the snow drifts across the center line. But on that February night, everything I thought I knew about that mountain went out the window. It started snowing about halfway through the climb. Not the light powder you see in postcards, the kind that hits fast, wet, and heavy. Within minutes, visibility dropped to 20 feet. The headlights turned into 2 glowing orbs in a solid white wall. Every flake looked like it was coming straight at me, hypnotic and endless. I slowed to 35, trying to keep the tires in the ruts left by whoever passed before me. But those ruts vanished quick. It was just me, the snow, and the low groan of the engine echoing off the mountains. The CB chatter died too. Usually there's at least a few drivers trading weather updates or complaining about chains. That night, nothing. Just the occasional hiss of static that sounded more like wind through a graveyard than radio interference. I remember checking the clock. 12:41 a.m., still 2 hours from Chehalis if I made good time. The defroster whined, barely keeping the windshield clear. I leaned forward, squinting through the wipers, and that's when I saw it. Movement, right at the edge of my headlights. At first I thought it was a bear. You see them sometimes near the pass. Hungry and desperate enough to wander down close to the road. But this thing moved different. Too smooth. Too deliberate. It crossed from right to left in 3 strides. Long, heavy steps that made the snow billow at its feet. I slammed the brakes on instinct. The trailer slid, the rig fishtailed, and for one terrifying second I thought I was going to jackknife right there on the mountain. Then the tires caught and everything went still. I stared through the windshield, heart pounding so loud I could hear it over the idling engine. Whatever it was, it stood halfway across the road, right in the center of my beams. 8, maybe 9 feet tall, covered head to toe in dark wet hair matted with snow. Broad through the shoulders, arms too long for its body, hands that hung low enough to brush its knees. It turned its head slowly toward me. For less than a second I saw its face. Flat nose, deep-set eyes that reflected light like an animal's. But the expression wasn't animal at all. It looked at me like it understood exactly what I was, and it wasn't impressed. Then it walked into the tree line and was gone. I don't know how long I sat there frozen. The engine hummed softly, steam rising off the hood. Snow piled up on the windshield faster than the wipers could clear it. My brain tried to file what I'd seen under anything rational. A moose, a trick of the headlights, exhaustion. But none of it fit. Finally, I eased off the brake and started rolling again. Every few seconds I checked my mirrors, half expecting to see it pacing me along the shoulder. The forest on both sides pressed close. Walls of white and black, branches sagging heavy with snow. Every gust of wind sounded like footsteps. When I finally crested the pass and started the descent, I thought I was in the clear. The snow lightened, and I could almost convince myself I'd imagined the whole thing. Then I saw movement again. Just a flash in the mirror, like something stepping from one lane to another behind the trailer. I hit the horn, loud and long. Nothing answered. But that's when the banging started. A single heavy thud against the trailer wall. Then another. Then two quick hits like fists pounding metal. Each impact rattled through the frame of the truck, deep enough that I could feel it in my chest. I downshifted and pushed the rig harder, praying the road stayed clear. The banging kept pace with my speed, not random, not wind, but rhythmic, measured. 3 hits. Pause. 3 hits again. When it finally stopped, I didn't look in the mirrors anymore. Didn't dare. By the time I reached the base of the pass, the storm had thinned into flurries. I pulled into the first truck stop I saw, parked under the lights, and shut everything down. My hands were trembling so bad I could barely hold my coffee when I went inside. The waitress gave me a look, said I was pale as snow. I told her I almost hit a bear up near the ridge. She just raised an eyebrow and said, "A bear? That high up this time of year?" Then she smiled, but not the friendly kind. "Them things don't like being seen," she said quietly. "Best not to talk about it too loud." Her words stuck with me long after I left. And the next morning, when I did my post-trip inspection, I realized why. Because there on the driver's side of my trailer, about 7 feet off the ground, was a single handprint pressed into the metal. At first I thought the handprint was just snow residue. Maybe I'd brushed against a tree branch on the climb and the pattern froze that way. But the more I looked, the less sense it made. It wasn't just a smudge. It was pressed in. The metal itself had a shallow dent, like something had pushed into it with impossible strength. I wiped the surface clean with my glove. The print stayed. 5 fingers. 4 long, 1 short, slightly offset, almost human, but not quite. The span from thumb to pinky was nearly twice the width of my hand, and the center of the palm had tiny ridges, like skin texture had been burned into the steel. I stood there staring at it while the morning traffic rolled past the lot. The other drivers coming in for breakfast barely noticed me. They were too busy scraping ice off windshields or arguing about tire chains. Meanwhile, I was standing next to my rig trying to convince myself that what I saw last night hadn't touched my truck. But I knew better. I grabbed my tape measure from the cab. From base to fingertip, 8 inches. Palm width, 11 inches. No human being has a hand that big. And even if they did, they couldn't dent reinforced aluminum just by pressing on it. I took a few photos with my phone from different angles. The flash reflected weird, almost like there were faint oils or residue in the grooves of the print. I could smell something too, faint but distinct. Wet earth, pine sap, and something else underneath, a musky animal but clean. When I went back inside for breakfast, the same waitress from the night before was still on shift. She saw me come in, pale and jittery, and poured coffee before I sat down. "Rough night?" she asked. I hesitated, then showed her one of the photos on my phone. She didn't even blink, just nodded once like she'd seen this kind of thing before. "You found a mark," she said. "What kind of mark?" I asked. "The kind they leave when they're curious." "You're lucky that's all you got." Her calm tone made my stomach twist. "You've seen this before?" She leaned on the counter, eyes flicking toward the snow-covered windows. "I've lived here my whole life," she said quietly. "We've all seen something. Up near Goat Rocks, through Chinook Pass, even down by Packwood. Hunters hear them. Loggers see trees snapped off 8 feet up. But truckers..." She paused. "Truckers are the ones who get closest. You all drive at the hours they like to move." I didn't touch my food. The other drivers laughed and swapped stories in the next booth. Normal life going on while this woman spoke like she was describing the weather. "You think it's real?" I finally asked. Her expression didn't change. "Does it matter what I think?" She said. "You saw it. It touched your truck. You already know it's real. I left the diner after that, couldn't eat another bite. Outside, the daylight made the mountains look harmless. Snow glittering under a blue sky. Everything so peaceful you'd never believe what lurks up there at night. But the handprint was still there, clear as ever. I tried calling a friend of mine, Dave, another long-haul driver who'd been through White Pass hundreds of times. When I told him what I'd seen, he went quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "I believe you." That surprised me. "Why?" I asked. "Because it happened to me once," he said. "Back in 2015, summer run, middle of the night hauling lumber. Something followed me for 6 miles near Rimrock Lake. I didn't see it, but I heard it. Heavy, two-legged, keeping pace with the truck. When I stopped at the rest area, there were tracks behind my trailer. Human-shaped, but each print was almost 2 feet long. His voice was calm, steady, the same way mine gets when I'm talking about something I wish wasn't true. That afternoon, I drove over to the maintenance bay at my company's yard in Chehalis. The mechanic, old guy named Walter, took one look at the dent and whistled. "You hit a tree limb?" "No," I said. "It was higher than the cab." He crouched closer, ran a hand along the impression. When he looked up at me, his face had gone pale. "This isn't from impact," he said. "It's a compression. Like someone pushed it in. You can see the stress lines around it." He glanced up at the ridge beyond the yard where the forest started again. Then softly, "White Pass, right?" I nodded. He didn't say anything after that, just stood and walked away, muttering, "They still up there?" That night I parked the truck under floodlights and went over the footage from my dash cam. At first it was just snow and darkness, same as I remembered. But when I slowed it down frame by frame, right before the truck shuttered on the pass, I caught something in the beams, a shape crossing the road. The same one I'd seen with my eyes, tall, broad, arms swinging low. And for one frame, as it turned its head toward the camera, the light caught its eyes. Amber, reflective, human and not. I shut the laptop, deleted the file, and sat there in the glow of the parking lights until dawn. Because the truth is, once you see something like that, you don't ever unsee it. You just learn to live with knowing. For 3 days I couldn't stop looking at that handprint. I'd check it every time I walked past the truck just to make sure it was still there, that I hadn't imagined it. And every time, it was. The dent, the ridges, the faint oily residue that never faded, even after washing the trailer twice. By the 4th morning, I realized I wasn't going to be able to let it go. So I went back up the mountain. I told dispatch I was scouting the route for road conditions, but that was a lie. I needed to see the spot again, the stretch where I'd first seen the figure cross in front of my truck. Maybe I'd find tracks. Maybe some rational clue that would put my mind at ease. White Pass in daylight looks nothing like it does at night. The same curves and ridges are there, but under the sun it all feels smaller, less mysterious, more human. Still, as I climbed higher, that old pressure settled back in my chest. The air itself feels thicker up there, like the mountain is watching you. When I reached the pull-off near where it happened, I parked and stepped out. Everything was silent, except for the wind pushing snow off the pines. I walked the shoulder slowly, scanning for footprints. At first, nothing. Then I saw it. About 20 yards down the slope, half covered by powder, a single track. It wasn't from a boot. It wasn't from an animal. 5 toes, deep heel, 18 inches long. The stride was wide too, leading off into the trees where the snow grew untouched and deep. I crouched to take a picture, but my hands were shaking so badly the photo came out blurred. I tried again, steadying the phone on my knee. That one was clear. When I straightened up, I noticed something else. Farther in, maybe 30 yards, 3 trees stood in a line. Their trunks were twisted, not broken from weight or wind, but twisted. The bark spiraled like rope, 8 feet off the ground. That's when I heard it, a single, low crack echoing through the woods. Not close, but not far either. It sounded like something heavy shifting its weight. I backed toward the truck, every nerve in my body screaming to move faster. When I climbed in and slammed the door, I swear I caught movement in the mirror. Something dark slipping behind a stand of furs. Not running, just watching. I didn't go back again after that. But I did send the photos, the handprint and the footprint, to a biologist I knew from a wildlife forum. I didn't tell him what I thought it was. Just said it was odd evidence from a remote route. He replied 2 days later, said the handprint looked primate in structure, but the finger proportions were off. The print depth, he said, suggested immense upper body strength. As for the footprint, his words were simple. If this isn't a hoax, you've documented something we're not supposed to have. That's when I realized I wasn't going to get the kind of answers I wanted. Not from science, not from anyone. A week later, I took another load through the pass. Couldn't avoid it, not in my line of work. This time the weather was clear, the road dry. But when I reached that same stretch, the world felt thinner. Like the distance between what's real and what isn't had worn down a little too much. I turned off the radio, rolled down the window, and for just a second I thought I heard something beneath the rumble of the engine. A deep, steady breathing coming from the tree line. Not animal, not human. Something else. When I got to Packwood that night, I stopped at the same diner, same waitress, same corner booth. She took one look at me and said, "You went back up there, didn't you?" I nodded. I had to know. She poured my coffee without a word, then leaned close. "You've got proof now, that's more than most, but take my advice, driver. Don't share it. The mountain doesn't like attention." I asked her what she meant. She only smiled, that tired, knowing smile again. Every few decades, someone brings back a handprint or a cast or a photo, and then the snow takes it. The proof disappears, or the person does. You hang on to the story if you want, but keep it to yourself. Some things are meant to stay between the road and whoever survives it. I never showed those photos to anyone else. They're still on an old hard drive at home, along with the dash cam footage I couldn't bring myself to delete. The handprint on the trailer eventually faded, or maybe I just convinced myself it did. But every time winter rolls in and I head through White Pass again, I slow down at that bend. And sometimes when the snow's falling thick and the world goes quiet, I see shapes between the trees, tall, slow-moving, watching the road. Always, just far enough away that I can tell myself they're tricks of the light. The truth is, I don't need anyone to believe me, because I was there, and I still carry the dent to prove it. You drive long enough at night, you get used to the voices, the hum of other drivers out there somewhere in the dark. Handles, jokes, warnings about speed traps or ice. The CB's never truly quiet. Even when you're alone, there's always static, always someone talking 100 miles away. But a few winters back, I heard a voice I can't explain. A voice that shouldn't have been there, and I've spent every mile since trying not to hear it again. It was just after midnight, running westbound on I-84 through the Columbia River Gorge. If you've ever driven that route, you know how it feels, and like threading a needle through stone. Mountains on both sides, the river glinting black to the south, cliffs rising like walls on the north. No cell service for half the stretch, and the wind there can push a fully loaded rig sideways if you're not paying attention. That night the weather was holding steady, cold, dry, not a cloud in sight. I had 40,000 pounds of canned produce in the trailer, headed for Portland. It was routine, uneventful, until the CB came alive. At first I thought it was normal chatter. The signal was faint, buried under static, but then I caught the words, so clipped, panicked. Coming fast. Breaker, anyone eastbound on 84, my brakes just failed. Repeat, brakes failed. I'm coming down off the hill near mile marker 61. I froze. That stretch is steep. A downgrade through a canyon with no median and barely any shoulder. If someone lost their brakes there, they were in serious trouble. I grabbed the mic. "This is westbound 74. I'm 10 miles ahead of you, driver. You got a runaway lane up there. Can you steer?" Static hissed, then his voice again, breathless. "Can't. She's heavy. Smoke in the cab. God, I can't." Then a crash of sound. Metal, wind, and the roar of something enormous tearing loose. The transmission cut out mid-scream. I felt my stomach drop. I'd been in this business 23 years and heard my share of near misses, but nothing like that. Nothing that raw. I keyed up again. "Driver, you copy? You still with us?" Nothing. I repeated it 3 more times. Still nothing but static. The silence that followed was heavy. The kind you only hear when something's gone horribly wrong. Other drivers started chiming in, voices filtering through the channel. "You get a location on that?" "He said mile 61, anyone close?" "I'm westbound 68, I'll look." I stayed tuned, heart hammering. 10 minutes later, another driver came on. A guy calling himself Iron Hand. Said he'd pulled off at 61, checked both sides. Nothing there. No wreckage, no smoke, no tire marks. Not even the smell of burnt rubber. Probably interference, he said. Skip signal bouncing from another state. Happens all the time. He was probably right, but I didn't believe it. That voice had been too clear, too local, and I could have sworn I heard the wind from the gorge behind it. That hollow howling echo you only get down there. Still, I tried to shake it off. I drove another 40 miles, dropped my load in Portland, then headed to the yard for rest. But all night I kept replaying that voice in my head. The panic. The sound of the crash, the way the transmission cut like a line going dead. The next morning, I called an old friend who works Oregon Highway Patrol out of the Dells. Told him what I'd heard. He checked the log. No accidents reported. No runaway truck. No damaged guardrails or debris. Probably radio skip, he said too. Happens when the atmosphere bounces signals from hundreds of miles away. I wanted to believe that, but something about it kept itching in my brain. A week later, I ran the same route again, same time, same clear night. And right as I passed mile 61, the CB hissed awake. That same static, that same broken transmission cutting through the dark. Breaker, anyone eastbound, my brakes, the exact words, same voice, same panic. Only this time the timestamp on my dash clock read 12:07 a.m., the same minute as the week before. I stared at the mic, unable to move. Every hair on my neck stood up. Then the same sound hit. The crash, the scream, the static cutting out. Perfectly identical. I didn't sleep that night. Didn't even finish the run. I pulled off at Hood River and sat in the cab until sunrise. The next day I asked around the truck stop. Most of the older drivers had heard stories like it. Phantom calls on dead channels. Old wrecks that replay their last transmissions every year or two. But one driver, a quiet guy from Spokane, said something that still makes my skin crawl. He said, "That hill at 61, the runaway lane? There was a crash there in 07. Tanker truck lost brakes. Driver burned alive before they could get him out. Name was Carl Benson." Then he added, "Used to go by the handle Freebird on Channel 19. And that's when I remembered the first thing that voice had said. Right before it screamed, "This is Freebird. My brakes just failed." I couldn't get the name out of my head. Freebird. That's what the driver in the old story went by. And it's what the voice said on the radio. I needed to know if it was real, or if every long-haul driver on that stretch had just inherited some old campfire rumor. The following week I stopped by the state patrol office in the Dalles. I told the desk sergeant I was a trucker who'd heard a distress call near mile 61 and wanted to make sure no one was in danger. He gave me that tired look cops reserve for night drivers and ghost stories. But when I mentioned the name Carl Benson, he raised an eyebrow. He disappeared into the back for a few minutes and came out holding a thin manila folder. "Benson 2007, he said, tapping the tab. "Tanker rollover. Brake failure on the downhill curve. Fuel ignited. Driver was trapped inside. Happened just after midnight." My stomach dropped. "What time exactly?" I asked. He flipped through the report. Dispatch log says 12:07 a.m., the same minute I'd heard the transmission. The sergeant shrugged it off. Maybe someone's replaying old CB recordings for laughs. Happens sometimes. Folks get bored. I thanked him and left, but my brain wouldn't let it go. If someone was pranking the channel, it would have to be local. Channel 19's range isn't much past 10 or 15 miles in that terrain. And both times I'd heard it were exactly a week apart, down to the minute. I started asking around at the truck stops along the gorge, Cascade Locks, Hood River, Troutdale. Most of the drivers brushed me off, said skip signals, atmospheric bounce, even pirate stations. But one old-timer named Dale leaned back in his booth, looked out the window and said, "Yeah, Freebird." I remember him. He told me Carl Benson had been a veteran, 20 years on the road, good driver, careful, the kind who kept his logbooks perfect. That night in '07, he was hauling gasoline out of Boise, running solo. His brakes overheated on the descent. By the time he hit the gorge, he couldn't slow down. He radioed for help the whole way down. Several drivers heard it. They say his last words were, "Tell my boy I'm still coming home." The story hit harder than I expected. I'd lost a friend in a wreck like that once. We all have if you've been behind the wheel long enough. That night I parked early, dead tired. But around midnight I woke to static. Faint, hissing, steady. The CB was on. I hadn't left it that way. The channel display flickered 19. Then came the voice, quiet but clear, Breaker 19. "This is Freebird. Anyone copy?" It wasn't distant this time. It sounded like it was inside the cab with me. I froze, didn't touch the mic. Didn't breathe. Eastbound on 84. Brakes gone. Coming in too hot. My radio wasn't supposed to transmit unless keyed. But the sound filled the cab anyway, echoing faintly off the glass. Then over the static, a new noise. The screech of metal on asphalt, the same crash I'd heard before. Only this time something followed it. A whisper. Close. So close it could have been behind my seat. "Don't stop." I turned, flashlight in hand. Nothing there, just the empty sleeper bunk and the hum of the fridge unit outside. I shut the radio off and pulled the fuse from the panel. Silence. The kind of silence that makes your pulse too loud in your ears. I sat that way until dawn, lights on, waiting for something else to happen. Nothing did. When I finally rolled out, I promised myself I'd forget it. Drivers hear all kinds of things at night. Voices, music, phantom chatter. The brain plays tricks when it's tired. That's what I told myself. But 2 nights later, it happened again. I was westbound through Pendleton, hours from the gorge. Different road, different state line. Still channel 19 static, then the same broken transmission. Breaker 19. "This is Freebird. Brakes gone." I shut the CB off immediately. Didn't matter. The voice bled through anyway. Faint but unmistakable, whispering from the dead speaker like it didn't need electricity to reach me. I pulled into the next rest area, heart hammering. There was an older rig parked beside mine, lights dimmed. Driver was out by his tires, smoking. When I told him what I'd been hearing, he dropped the cigarette and crushed it out in the snow. "You hear him too?" he said quietly. I nodded. "Been hearing that call 20 years, he said. "Used to think it was interference. But it follows certain drivers. Ones who answer. I didn't sleep that night. Couldn't because he was right and I had answered. The first night when I said, 'You got a runaway lane up there.' And now it felt like Freebird wasn't broadcasting anymore. He was calling. I lasted maybe a week before I went back. You can't live with that kind of noise in your head. The question of whether the dead can still key a mic. So I took another load through the gorge, same route, same time of night. If he wanted me to hear him, I'd be listening. The sky was clear, the air sharp enough to sting. Moonlight flashed off the river like a blade. I passed mile 5960, and then the hill began to drop. Every instinct screamed, "Don't do this," but I tuned the CB anyway. Channel 19 static, low and steady. Nothing for the first mile. Then the hiss deepened, turned grainy, and the voice bled through like water seeping under a door. Breaker 19. Anyone eastbound? Brakes gone. I can't. Same words, same panic. Only this time the transmission didn't cut. Smoke in the cab. Can't see the runaway lane. God help me. The sound filled the truck. Not through the speaker anymore, it vibrated through the metal, through the wheel under my hands. And then another voice came, soft, layered under his. You heard me once. You can finish it. I slammed the brakes, pulled onto the shoulder. Wind howled through the gorge, carrying grit that stung my face when I climbed out. The mile marker sign beside me read 61. I followed the beam of my flashlight down the embankment. There, half buried in dirt and weeds, was the edge of a concrete pad, the remains of an old turnout long since closed by rockslide. Beside it, twisted rust and shattered glass glittered faintly. Truck wreckage. I scrambled down the slope until my boots sank into soot-black soil. It smelled like burned metal even after all these years. When I brushed away a layer of ash, I found what was left of a tanker's frame, melted into the ground. The tag plate was still bolted to a beam. Faded letters read Benson Hauling Cumber ID number 2347. My throat closed. Carl Benson. Freebird. I crouched there, wind screaming through the canyon, and realized I could still hear the static faintly, coming from below the wreck, from the metal itself. I pressed my ear to the cold frame. Tell my boy I'm still coming home. A whisper, thin and distant, like the last bit of signal trapped in steel. Then silence. Real silence, the kind that hurts. I climbed back up, shaking so bad I could barely grab the guardrail. When I reached the cab, the CB was still on, channel 19 glowing green. But the speaker wasn't silent anymore, it was breathing. Slow, rhythmic, steady as a heartbeat. Not mechanical, not wind, human. I shut the radio off, yanked the fuse, and threw it out the window. The breathing stopped. I drove the rest of the way in complete silence, eyes locked on the road, not daring to look in the mirrors. Because deep down I knew if I did, I'd see headlights that weren't there. In Portland the next morning, I told a mechanic what happened. He popped the dash panel open and stared at the wiring. Your CB doesn't even have power, man, he said. Fuse lines burnt clean. Couldn't broadcast if it wanted to. I didn't answer. Didn't need to. A few nights later, one of the older dispatchers pulled me aside. Said he'd heard from a friend in maintenance who'd heard my story. Then he told me something that froze me more than the cold ever could. The kid Benson mentioned in his last call, his son, still runs out of Boise. Different company now. He uses the same handle. Freebird too. I asked if he used channel 19. He nodded. Every night. Says he keeps it open in case he ever hears his old man call in. That was 2 years ago. Since then, I've stayed off the gorge at night. But sometimes, parked in some quiet lot with the engine off, I'll catch a faint hiss in the dark. It'll build then fade like a heartbeat behind the static. And just when I think I'm imagining it, the same broken voice cuts through. Breaker 19. Anyone eastbound? I don't answer anymore. I just turn the volume down and listen until it fades. Because maybe he's not lost. Maybe he's just stuck in that last mile. Engine screaming, radio open, still trying to warn anyone who'll listen. Maybe that's what happens to some of us when we die on the road. We keep driving the route, forever looking for someone to answer. And maybe that's the curse of Channel 19. Once you answer back, it never really goes quiet again. I've driven long enough to know that fatigue can play tricks on you. Highway hypnosis, tunnel vision, phantom shadows in the mirrors, none of that surprises me anymore. But what happened on Highway 2 outside of Wenatchee wasn't fatigue. It wasn't a trick of light. Because I still have the receipt to prove it happened, even though the place I stopped at that night doesn't exist anymore. It was late October, and I was hauling lumber eastbound toward Spokane. Clear skies, cold air, the kind that makes the road shimmer under the high beams. I'd been on the clock for almost 13 hours, fighting the urge to pull over. But I wanted to reach the state line before morning traffic hit. Coffee was running low and my eyes felt like they had sand in them. That's when I saw the sign. Rest stop. 2 miles, white reflective letters, new looking with a little gas icon and a diner fork beside it. I didn't remember that rest stop being there, but Washington adds new ones now and then. I figured maybe I'd just missed the update. Sure enough, 2 miles later I saw the exit, narrow, unmarked, curling into the woods. The headlights caught a single old-style sign that read, Cascade Valley Rest Stop. Food. Fuel. Open 24 hours. Perfect. The off-ramp was longer than usual, a steady slope that dipped into darkness. When the truck leveled out again, the trees opened up to a small clearing. And there it was, a rest area straight out of the 70s, a low diner building with a flickering neon sign that said Eats. 2 old gas pumps under a tin awning, a single streetlight buzzing with moths. It looked ancient but alive, like someone had frozen a roadside stop in time. I parked near the diner. The engine ticked in the cold air as I climbed out. A thin fog rolled low along the pavement, hugging the ground like smoke. The air smelled like pine needles and diesel and something else I couldn't place, old coffee and burnt sugar maybe. Inside, the diner was quiet. A jukebox hummed softly in the corner, though no song played. The walls were yellowed with age, lined with photos of smiling travelers, all sun-faded. Behind the counter stood a woman who looked like she belonged to another decade. Hair in a bun, pink uniform, name tag that read, Lois. Coffee? She asked, already pouring. Please, I said, sliding into a booth by the window. The coffee was hot, strong, and tasted like something you could stand a spoon in. I didn't care. It was perfect. A minute later, a man in a trucker's cap came in and sat 2 booths down. He looked tired, eyes red, skin gray under the fluorescent light. He nodded at me but didn't speak. Lois poured him a cup too, same automatic smile. You running east or west? She asked me. East, I said. Spokane by morning if the weather holds. Her smile twitched slightly. Careful on the grade past Stevens Pass, she said softly. Sometimes the fog gets so thick it carries things with it. I laughed a little, assuming she meant deer. She didn't laugh back. When I went to pay, she handed me a faded paper receipt, the kind printed from old cash registers that still use carbon ink. The total read $2.15. I handed her a 5. She smiled again, but it didn't reach her eyes. Don't stay long, she said. When I stepped outside, the other trucker's rig was gone. So were the moths. The air had turned still, heavy, the way it does right before snow. I climbed into the cab and turned the key. The headlights washed over the road ahead, and for a split second I thought I saw movement near the gas pumps. A figure standing still beside them. Too tall, shoulders hunched, face hidden by shadow. I blinked, and it was gone. Shaking it off, I pulled out onto the narrow exit road and followed the curve back toward the highway. The GPS didn't register the location at all, just a straight line through blank space. When I merged back onto Highway 2, the radio crackled once and went silent again. I figured it was a bad connection. It wasn't until the next morning after I made my delivery that I looked at the receipt again. Something about it didn't seem right. The paper was yellowed, brittle, like it had been sitting in a drawer for decades, and where the date should have been printed, the ink had faded to almost nothing. But when I tilted it under the light, I could still make it out. October 29th, 1977. The receipt sat on my dash all morning, curling at the edges from the heat. Every time I glanced at it, that faded date burned a little deeper into my brain. October 29th, 1977. 46 years ago, to the day. At first, I tried to explain it away. Old register paper, misprint, a novelty receipt maybe. But that diner, that woman, the other trucker, none of it had felt like a prank. It had felt normal until it didn't. By noon, I couldn't stand it anymore. I'd made my delivery in Spokane, refueled, and decided to turn back west. If the rest stop was real, I'd see it again. If it wasn't, I needed to know that too. I hit Highway 2 around 5 p.m., the sun low behind the Cascades. The road wound through the pines like a ribbon of light fading into shadow. According to my memory, the rest stop should have been about 5 miles west of Cole's Corner, right before a sharp left curve that cuts into the forest. I drove it slow. Every turn, every mile marker. Nothing. No sign for Cascade Valley Rest Stop, no gas station, no diner. Just solid forest thick with cedar and fir. No openings big enough to fit a parking lot. I thought maybe I'd missed the turn, so I doubled back. Still nothing. Finally, I pulled into a ranger station off the main road. The ranger behind the counter was a young guy, maybe late 20s, wearing the kind of expression people get when they've heard too many ghost stories from tourists. I showed him the receipt. You ever hear of a place called Cascade Valley Rest Stop? I asked. He looked at it, then at me. His brow furrowed. Where'd you get this? Last night, I said. Off Highway 2, about 5 miles west of Cole's Corner. Diner, gas pumps, woman named Lois, I bought coffee. He blinked. Sir, there's never been a rest stop there. Not in my lifetime, not in my dad's. Closest one's 20 miles east. I laughed, but it came out wrong. Too sharp, too shaky. You sure? Because I parked there. I have the receipt. He turned the paper over under the light. When he saw the date, his eyes widened. 1977? You're joking, right? I'm not. He hesitated, then opened a drawer and pulled out an old binder labeled Incident Archive. Flipping through the pages, he stopped on a yellowed clipping taped to one of the sheets. It was from the Wenatchee World, dated November 1st, 1977. The headline read, Fire Destroys Cascade Valley Rest Stop, 4 Dead. The photo showed the same diner. The same pumps, even the same neon Eats sign hanging crooked above the awning, only now it was engulfed in flames. According to the article, a propane leak in the diner's kitchen had triggered an explosion just after midnight. 3 travelers and the night waitress were trapped inside. The building burned to the ground before firefighters could reach it. The highway department demolished what was left and sealed the access road the following spring. The waitress's name stopped me cold. Lois Weaver, age 42. The ranger looked uncomfortable. That receipt? That's from that place, isn't it? I nodded, feeling the blood drain from my face. I drank coffee there last night, I said quietly. She poured it herself. He didn't answer. Didn't have to. The room felt smaller suddenly, air thick and cold despite the space heater buzzing behind the counter. Can I keep this? He asked finally, motioning to the receipt. No, I said, folding it into my wallet. I think I'll hang on to it. He looked relieved that I was leaving. So was I. On the way back toward Leavenworth, the sun dipped behind the ridges and the sky turned violet. I passed the same stretch of road where the exit should have been. Nothing but trees. Except this time my headlights caught something I hadn't noticed before. A break in the guardrail, rusted and bent outward like it had been hit years ago. Behind it, faint tire tracks disappeared into the brush. I slowed, staring into the darkness. The trees were packed tight, no sign of a road. But when I turned the radio down, I heard something faint, a hum, like electricity, or maybe a jukebox muffled and far away. I rolled the window down, listening harder. It was there, low music drifting through the cold air, so faint I almost thought it was in my head. Then a woman's voice, faint but clear, cutting through the static of the forest. Coffee's hot, driver. Don't stay long. My heart stopped. The same words she'd said the night before. I floored it, got back onto the highway and didn't look in the mirrors once. The music followed me for almost a mile before fading completely. By the time I hit Leavenworth, the stars were out and the road behind me looked perfectly normal. No fog, no music, no diner. But that night in the motel, I took the receipt out again, half hoping the date had somehow changed. It hadn't. What had changed was the ink. A new line had appeared under the total, faint but visible, written in the same fading typewriter font. Thank you for stopping. Come again soon. I told myself I was done with Highway 2. No more night runs, no more mountain passes, no more wondering if I'd hallucinated the whole thing. But that's the thing about truckers, we're creatures of routine. You swear off a route and 3 months later, dispatch puts you right back on it like it was meant to happen. This time it was a lumber haul from Everett to Spokane. Same direction, same highway, same week in October. I tried to laugh it off when I saw the assignment. But deep down I knew I was going, because some questions don't let go until you look them in the eye. The day was clear. No fog, no snow. By the time darkness settled, I'd just passed Cole's Corner again. That familiar curve appeared ahead, the one where the trees close in and the road dips out of sight. Every part of me tensed, waiting for something. A flicker of neon, a flash of light between the pines, anything, nothing came. Still, I slowed to a crawl, scanning both sides of the road. That's when I saw it. A rig pulled onto the shoulder about 100 yards ahead, hazards blinking. a driver standing beside it, flashlight in hand. I eased up alongside him and rolled the window down. "You good, driver?" I called out. He nodded, stepping closer. Middle-aged guy, beard, heavy jacket. He looked rattled. "Yeah," he said. "Just needed a minute. You ever stop at that little diner up the road?"
Cascade Valley?
My stomach dropped. "You've been there?" He held up a small slip of paper. Even from the cab, I recognized it instantly. The same faded carbon ink receipt. "Got this last night," he said. "Diner, coffee, lady named Lois, then when I came back in daylight, nothing, forest." He tried to laugh, but it died halfway out. "Thought I was losing it till I saw you slow down here. Figured maybe you knew something." I climbed down, boots crunching on gravel. The night air was cold enough to sting, full of pine and silence. I told him everything. The receipt, the article, the voice in the woods. When I finished, he just stared at the tree line like he was trying to see through it. "You hear that?" he asked suddenly. At first I thought he meant wind, but then I heard it too. Faint and hollow, drifting out of the trees. Music. An old jukebox tune. Elvis maybe, or something older. The same sound I'd heard months ago. We followed it. There was a narrow path hidden behind the guardrail, half buried in leaves. The farther we walked, the clearer the music became. A woman's voice hummed softly between songs. The same calm tone I'd heard behind the counter. Fog began curling around our legs, thick and low, carrying that same smell of coffee and burnt sugar. Then the trees opened. There it was, the diner, lit up exactly as I remembered. Eat sign flickering above the door, gas pumps gleaming under pale light. But everything was wrong. Colors muted like the world had lost its contrast. The air felt heavier, the sound thicker. Lois stood behind the counter, smiling that same tired smile. Only this time her eyes looked directly at me. "You came back," she said. I couldn't speak. The other driver stepped forward, trembling. "I think we got lost," he said. She shook her head slowly. "No one gets lost here. They just stopped too long." The jukebox clicked. For a moment, the hum of engines filled the room. The echo of trucks rolling past on a highway that didn't exist anymore. I glanced toward the window. Outside, the gas pumps flickered like candlelight. Beyond them, shadows moved. Indistinct human shapes, dozens of them standing perfectly still in the fog. "Who are they?" I whispered. Lois turned to look. "Travelers," she said softly. "Same as you. They stop for coffee, promise themselves just a few minutes, and forget the road keeps moving." My pulse hammered. Then why am I seeing this? She smiled faintly. "Because you remembered to leave last time." The air shifted. The floor vibrated like a truck engine revving under my feet. The jukebox cut out. Then came a low rumble from somewhere outside. A deep, thunderous whoosh that sounded like flames catching. Smoke seeped in through the vents, thick and dark. The room shimmered, and for a split second, the diner around us burned. Walls collapsing, neon melting, everything swallowed by fire. I grabbed the other driver's arm. "Run!" We burst through the door, choking on smoke that vanished the moment we hit the cold air. The forest was quiet again. No diner, no music. Just darkness and the smell of wet pine. We stumbled back to the road in silence, neither of us speaking until we reached our rigs. When I climbed into the cab, my hands were shaking so hard I dropped my keys twice. But when I finally started the engine, something slid off my lap. A new receipt, same faded font, same total, $2.15, only this time the date read October 29th, 2023, and underneath, printed faintly, "Thank you for coming back. Drive safe." I looked over. The other driver sat frozen in his cab, staring at an identical slip of paper in his hand. Our headlights hit the trees, and for a heartbeat I could have sworn the fog between them formed the shape of a woman, smiling. I drive that route every few months now. And every October I see fresh flowers laid beside the broken guardrail. Never the same bouquet twice. No one ever admits to leaving them there. But every driver who's run Highway 2 long enough knows that spot. They call it Lois's Stop, and no one ever parks there after dark, because some rest stops never close. They just wait,